Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about a huge pattern change that'll be impacting the United States throughout the week. It'll be bringing the threat for an Arctic blast to parts of the United States, and as well as the potential for a winter storm. This will also bring a lot of moisture, leading to a lot of rainfall, and perhaps even some severe weather. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. And we'll first begin with the southern plains, and this is an area that we actually have a lot of cloud cover in, including parts of the southeast like Florida. And the reason why is because we have Hurricane Norma, which is back down in parts of Mexico. This has just made landfall. It was a hurricane at one point, and has now made landfall in Mexico, moving off to the north. And what this will do over the next couple of days is bring a lot of rainfall to a large chunk of the Great Plains, and eventually impacting areas like the Ohio Valley and the Midwest. Now, I mentioned there's a lot of cloud cover, and again, the reason why is because we have very strong upper level winds right now that are steering these clouds off to the east. So you'll see a lot of cloud cover if you're anywhere along the Gulf Coast for the next probably day or two. It's gonna be pretty cloudy there. In addition to this, we'll be watching for showers and storms throughout the week across the Great Plains. So this entire area here will be under the gun for showers and storms anyway as we go into the week. So we'll be talking about more details on that here in just a moment. Back over in the northeast right now, not really seeing a whole lot of activity, but there's a lot of cloud cover, maybe a couple passing showers. Overall, though, it's mostly just clouds right now. Back in parts of the central and northern plains, a very small disturbance with a couple of passing showers. Moving across Nebraska and as well South Dakota, that'll continue to march toward Minnesota and Iowa. Again, no concern with that as of right now. Also, back over on the west coast of the United States, we also have another little disturbance that is near San Francisco right now, and this is also bringing some spotty showers. But overall, again, nothing too concerning in the short term. But what we have to watch for is the long term, because we have a lot of changes that'll be happening this week. And to look at those changes, we're going to look at the jet stream. This gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States. So for today, we do have a low pressure system that is centered back over New England. We also have a weak upper level disturbance that is centered over the San Francisco area, so northern California. Meanwhile, not really any high pressure systems here in the upper levels. We're not really looking at least any definitive areas of high pressure. But once we go throughout the week, things are going to change pretty rapidly. So by Tuesday, we're going to be watching for a low pressure system back down near California. And this will be something to watch for showers and storms for parts of the southern and central plains, and eventually in the Midwest as we go throughout the week. It's actually going to cross right over the Rocky Mountains and eventually go toward the Midwest. So this will bring that threat for some showers and storms. And we'll also be watching back near the Gulf Coast for a high pressure system to begin to build. And this will start to kind of bring the warm and dry air back to much of the southeast quadrant of the United States. By the time we get to Wednesday, things are going to shape up into a pretty intense overall storm. We're going to have that low pressure system start to move into parts of Arizona. We'll also be watching for another storm that'll form back over north of Washington. This will be the one that could bring a pretty substantial cool down to much of the United States. I'm going to show you what that looks like here in just a second, but this is really the key area if you're looking forward to a really big cool down across the United States. This right here is more of a rainmaker more than anything. This will bring maybe a little bit of snowfall as we go later into the week, but it's really not going to bring much of any. It's going to be mostly a rain event across much of the southern and central plains and eventually the Midwest. By the time we get to Thursday, that low pressure system moves off to the north and northeast. Then we'll be watching for a more definitive low pressure system moving out of Canada. This is where the colder air is going to come from, because obviously low pressure systems coming out of the Pacific Ocean, they're not pulling colder air over there. They're going to be pulling colder air out of that cold air mass that's back up in Canada, and that's why this system here is much more important for a cool down. So as we go into Thursday into Friday, that low pressure system moves across the Midwest. We'll be watching for a circulating, basically upper level disturbance here, that low pressure system, as we go into Friday into Saturday. Now there's a lot of uncertainty of where this low pressure system actually goes. If it pushes more down to the south and southeast, we're going to probably see a pretty substantial Arctic blast for parts of the northern plains, and we'll also see a pretty substantial cool down even as far south as potentially the Gulf Coast, with the threat for wind chills in the 30s by Halloween morning or even the following day. So it could get very cold. There's also a chance that this goes a bit more off to the east and kind of kisses along the Canada and United States border and doesn't really bring nearly as much of an Arctic blast. We've been looking for more of an Arctic blast, perhaps possibly near Montana. Elsewhere elsewhere, maybe a cool down that extends down to Kansas, perhaps into the Texas Panhandle, but it would not be nearly as substantial. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. Now, the European model kind of shows that it moves across parts, again, of the Pacific Northwest, and eventually going into next week, that's when things start to get a little bit more interesting, where we have a very sharp divide here, a cold front moving across parts of the southern tier of the United States. But how far south will this actually go? Because that's the big question mark. Well, now let's answer this question by looking at the temperature anomalies. This gives us an idea of the temperature from average. So basically we're looking at here is the red's going to represent above normal temperatures, and then below normal in the blue. And the darker it is, that means it's further away from the average point in your specific location. So as we go into Monday and Tuesday this week, again, notice a fairly warm air mass across much of the eastern tier of the United States. That's really not going to be any change from what we've been seeing the last several days. Here is where that cold air mass lies. It's going to be back up in Montana. Montana will see this cold blast as early as Tuesday or Wednesday, so it's going to be felt there. The question mark will be when this low pressure system releases from this point up here. How far south will this actually go? That's, again, the huge question mark that we have right now. So notice as we go into Friday, European model starts to show at least that we're looking at a low pressure system across parts of Minnesota. We start to see that cold air start to dip down into even Nebraska, the Dakotas as well. Eventually, as we get closer to Saturday and to Sunday, it kind of sits again. It doesn't really move a whole lot. And then we see another low pressure system try to push its way down to the south with a cold front as we get closer to Sunday and Monday. So closer to Halloween Day, notice this huge cold air mass, which this would be the coldest of the air, would be moving down to the south. And that is what the huge question mark is right now. Again, we could see this happen where it goes further down to the south here and impacts areas even as far south as the Gulf Coast. We also could see this go more to the east and really not impact these areas at all. So that's what we have to watch for the next several days, since this is still 7 to 8 days out. This very well easily could change. As we go closer to Halloween Day, this is what the European model shows, a bit of a weaker cold air mass overall, but still below normal temperatures, with perhaps a revengeance of another cold blast behind that as we go into November. So a lot of things to watch for, but a lot of these things that we are watching for are still about 7 to 8 days out, so things are bound to change. One thing we can look at as well is the wind chills, and this is something you might be interested in. How cold are we actually going to feel if this does end up happening? Well, we're probably going to be by Saturday in the teens, single digits, perhaps even below zero for wind chills in some areas like the Dakotas, so it's going to get cold there almost regardless of what happens. But the question mark is, how far south does this go? Well, if it goes far enough to the south, areas like DFW and North Texas by Halloween morning could be as cold as the 30s and even perhaps the 20s, and even back into, like, you know, the Midwest, for example, we could be down in the teens and 20s as well for those wind chills. And look at this big cold air mass as well, by the way, the European model is picking out back over in the northern plains. So again, a lot of uncertainty, nothing set in stone here. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because we'll be deciphering this over the next several days, so make sure you stay tuned. Last thing I want to show you is the future radar. Again, we do have a chance for a winter storm, a lot of rainfall over the next several days, primarily Tuesday and Wednesday from the Midwest to the southern plains. We'll be watching for a winter storm potential, but most of this should stay out of the United States. We might see a little bit clip North Dakota and Montana, but overall nothing too substantial as of right now. And then we might see more snow for like Minnesota, Nebraska, perhaps as far south as Kansas going into next week. But again, way too uncertain, because we are just so far out right now from this even happening. This is what the European model shows in terms of snowfall, so it looks pretty likely we'll probably at least see some snow in Montana, perhaps even into North Dakota by Friday. And once we go into next week, again, the European model brings snow as far south as like the Texas Panhandle. Again, things could easily change in the next several days, so stay tuned. We'll keep you posted with the latest. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.